joining us now from Las Vegas. Finally, I got her up in the morning in time before I went off the air. I'm so proud of her. Megan Barth, Reagan baby, Megan Barth has gotten up early just for me to get on my show. She's in Las Vegas on Western time. Megan, good to have you with us.
Hey, John, thanks so much. Good to see you last week at CPAC.
I know it's good to get you up so early. Thank you for coming on my show on the East Coast.
I'm on News Radio, of course. You guys start early on the East Coast.
Oh, we got to start early. You got to get up, man. You got to get out of that bed and go. So I want to get your take on a few things. First of all, I had you on because I read your email on Sam Nunberg, and I got to tell you, I must have laughed for 5 minutes. And although we covered that yesterday, and I couldn't get you on because you were fully booked, I just want you to give kind of an overview of what your thoughts were on Sam, the crazy man, Nunberg, yesterday, 2 days ago, whenever it was.
Do you remember your college days and there was like a guy like Flounder, and he goes on this complete entire bender and then he basically wakes up the next morning with a hangover and has to go to school? I mean, that's kind of what I was witnessing, the complete meltdown of this guy who was completely out of his mind. I mean, it was like either a hangover or he was drunk. And even the CNN anchor said, have you been drinking? I smell alcohol in your breath. It was a complete mess, and it was a public mess. Part of me felt bad for him, but part of me was like, this guy is making his bed really badly, and he's lying in it.
Yeah, well, it was the whole thing was ridiculous, and he kept doubling down. Like every interview got longer and longer and longer, which is also a sign of not having it all together because there was no discipline. It was like every interview he did, he wanted to outdo the former one. And so it really got to be ridiculous. And
like he was taking shots between the interviews, and just getting more long-winded and more rambling. And I forgot to mention that. I better add that on to my skit, And he did admit to taking antidepressants. So if you're taking antidepressants and you're boozing at the same time, not a good combo.
I don't think it is. That's kind of a Molotov cocktail right there, isn't it?
Right.
Right, because and what the alcohol does, if you take antidepressants, is the alcohol acts basically as an antidote for the antidepressant because it is a depressant. So you're taking an antidepressant, and then you're drinking alcohol, which is a depressant, and so they negate each other, and all you do is get depressed and drunk. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Which is pretty much what he looked like.
Depressed and drunk. I mean, I felt bad for him, and then I stopped feeling bad for him. And then I'm like, well, he's just, like, out of his mind. And then he was like, I thought when he got on Aaron, and he got on I think it was Jake Tapper, and he called Sarah Huckabee Sanders a fat slob. I really thought that was a bit. I mean, see, I would have cut him off right there. Thanks for bringing that up.
I was going to mention that. I mean, you want to talk about, well, no wonder why he got fired from the Oval Office, right, or if he was even near there. And he didn't get fired.
He was never there.
Once. He got fired twice. Well, obviously, if he was kind of exhibiting this type of behavior, number one, but number two, if he felt like that, against his former colleagues, that had to come out some way or another. He was either insubordinate or he was argumentative or something. Because you cannot, if you truly think that someone is a fat slob and you use all of this awful language, and then he goes, well, I'm really not, trashing her looks. Well, actually you are. You are trashing her looks. And he's the only one that I've heard say really anything negative about Sarah that's not in Hollywood. Everyone that I've talked to, especially in the radio business, they think she's doing a fantastic job.
She's doing a great job. I mean, look, it's a double-edged sword because I'm a White House correspondent. I have credentials. So as a Trump supporter, she's doing a great job. As a White House correspondent, I find her to be unbelievably frustrating because she never answers a question straight and she gives no information. I mean, she really gives nothing. And she does it in a way where you don't even get mad at her. Compared to Sean Spicer, who I would go to Sean's briefings and I would have a story immediately because he'd fight with somebody he would answer questions. He actually tried to answer questions. Sarah is the artful dodger. She answers nothing, says nothing. So that's frustrating. But if you're a Trump supporter, she's doing exactly what you ought to do, which is basically fending off a hostile press environment. So that's kind of the take on that double-edged sword. You know, Megan, I'm going out there on the 13th. I hope you'll join us for America First Policies. We're having a tax cut rally. Mike Pence is going to be there in Vegas, and I'll be sure that you know where it is, and I'd love to have you with us, and maybe I can find a way to get you involved because I know you're such a big supporter of the tax cuts and of the president. And so be sure as the time gets closer, we stay in touch with each other.
Absolutely.
And then after that, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Great.
I'll come out there a couple days early, and then I'll see my son in Reno. The only problem is getting from Vegas to Reno. Like, there's no easy way to do that, right? You got to either fly,
Southwest,
you can't drive.
Hour and 20 minutes.
On the plane?
Yep.
So I got to take.
It's the only way to do it. Otherwise, you're going to drive 7 hours, 8 hours.
I'm not going to drive 7 hours. It's like, and my son says you got to drive 7 hours through, like, there isn't anything there. Like, if you run out of gas, you're basically dead. Is that true?
Exactly.
He said you run out of gas and then you'll be found dead. All right, so I got to do that when I get out there. You're in Vegas. Megan, we haven't heard anything about this Vegas shooter. Like, nothing. Zilch, there's no media coverage. What's going on?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there hasn't been any media coverage because there really hasn't been any interest, has there? I mean, the Parkland shooting, that's all we heard about for 2 weeks, headline news. There were kids being bussed all over the country, telling us that they want to confiscate our guns, and it's great. And if we disagree with them, then, we're child murderers. There was no sort of rallying cry to get to the bottom of the largest massacre in our country's history. We know nothing about the shooter. One, because he destroyed his hard drive, but Sheriff Joe Lombardo and the FBI had come out, I think maybe a month ago, and said that they found child porn on his computer. Well, how did they find child porn if there was no hard drive? There's all these conflicting statements, and the autopsy has not been released yet. And so when you have this vacuum of silence, of misinformation, or lack of information, rather, then you have it filled with misinformation and disinformation and conspiracy theories. But when you look at the technical aspects of the shooting, he had his east window broken out, which looked over, of the Mandalay, which looked over the event venue. He had the south window broken out. There's no way that he used both windows in that amount of time. The shooting only lasted, I think it was 9 minutes total, and 1,100 rounds. It would be very difficult to get off that many rounds using two windows, and even using one window. Yes, bump stocks can change it to a near automatic, but from what I've read, it's nearly technically impossible for one shooter with his equipment to get off 1,100 rounds.
And here's my question. It was at the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino. I have been there a number of times. It's kind of, so people that don't know Las Vegas, it is not on the Strip. It's called the Off the Strip Hotel. Very nice hotel. And actually, I like gaming there because it's kind of out of the pathway, but it's got a great casino there. But how did he get those guns in there? Right? I mean, they have security.
Right.
I mean, you walk in there, you get out of a cab, and, there's the security there. There's cameras all over the place. I mean, this guy brings in these huge bags of, semi-automatic weapons, bags of them. And, nobody asks a question. Nobody checks it. Nobody questions it. What was that about?
Well, he did drive there, and they found, I can't remember the poundage, but they found tanninite, an explosive in his car. I think a couple 100 pounds of tanninite in his car, which we haven't heard about, right? Mm-hmm. There was a valet receipt with his girlfriend's name on it, but supposedly she's not a person of interest. So he did drive there. He only lived an hour outside of the Strip in Mesquite. So he was able to, I believe, use the elevators from the parking garage, which can take you to the main floor, and then you just go into some other elevators and go up to the room. They're pretty much close and connected. I also heard he was using a storage elevator, which would be unusual, and you would think that would kind of sound an alarm. Mm-hmm. So there's a little conflicting stories there, but he was just basically unloading his car.
And he was there a couple of days, right? He
was there for, I think, 4 days, and he never let anybody in the room, which now has changed policies even across the country where there has to be a wellness check after a certain amount of time.
So he wouldn't even let the maid in, right? He had one of those do not disturb things.
From what I understand, right? I think he had room service brought in.
So room service, no maid service, so nobody actually ever went in the room to see what the hell he was doing in there, and the gun setup he had. And the windows, the two windows that were broken, were they broken before the shooting, right? It's not like the shots broke them. They were broken out with a device to then be able to shoot through them, right?
I think so. He had two sniper platforms set up. So he had one sniper platform on the east side, and then he had one sniper platform on the south side. And it's like, well, why would you need two sniper platforms? Well, one of my friends in law enforcement said, he was probably scoping out the event for days because it was a multi-day event. He might have even gone to the event and looked at where the soft targets were. Mm-hmm. But the east window that he had broken out overlooked what my friend would call a kill box, meaning he had the perfect trajectory, he had the perfect view, and he had the perfect opportunity, perfect location as far as that room is concerned, to do as much damage just from that one window alone.
So why would he even need the second window?
Right. Exactly.
Unless there was a second person there.
That's always been my theory. There was an adjoining room. There were multiple. I was listening to the police scanner within probably 30 seconds of the shooting when it started. I got a tweet on my phone saying live from an active shooter, on the strip, so I immediately jumped on the police scanner. And it was amazing to me how quickly our first responders were able to isolate and eliminate the threat. I listened to the whole thing. And dispatch had hundreds of calls coming in saying that there were active shooters everywhere, that there were car bombs everywhere. It was, the police were being sent to the Excalibur. They were being sent to the Luxor. There was a live shooter at the Tropicana, even at Treasure Island, which is on the opposite end of the strip.
It's on the opposite end. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. So there was so much misinformation coming into the dispatch that's what always surprised me, that SWAT was able to breach his door, I think it was within 10 to 11 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Tell you what, Megan Barth, there's a lot of unanswered questions about Las Vegas.
Yes.
And again, it's kind of like I was on earlier, I changed my position on something. When the conspiracies first hit about Vegas, I was very suspect. I'm like, okay, we got some crackpot that killed people. The guy's a madman. But the fact that there has been just nothing on it, it's like crickets, like there's nothing. And what really got me was what you brought up at the first, and I'm out of time, so I'm going to end with this, which is when the sheriff came out and said, well, we found child pornography on his computer. And this was a month after the FBI said, we don't have a hard drive. Well, I mean, either you have it or you don't. I mean, that right there led me to believe that, wait a minute, somebody's not telling the truth one way or the other. Megan, I got to go. I want to thank Megan Barth, Reagan Baby, for being with us. Go to ReaganBabe.com, and I will see you on April 12th.